In Ukraine right now, it's a little bit past midnight, February 24th, Ukraine time, marking the second anniversary of the start of the Russian invasion. 2 years later, much has changed, but much still remains the same. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has more.
Today, the Biden administration has announced sanctions against Russian entities, and a Russian drone strike has killed at least 3 people in the Ukrainian port city of Odessa. Today's headlines are not dissimilar from those of February 2022 or late February 2023, but the outlook of the war has dramatically shifted. On Monday, Russian forces captured the Ukrainian city of Avdiivka, the second city to fall within the last 7 months after the fall of Bakhmut. Ukrainian forces have been slowly losing ground. On Friday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer traveled to Ukraine with a delegation of Democratic senators. He told Ukrainian officials that the American people stand with Ukraine and will keep fighting to get Ukraine the funding it needs for the war effort. The visit of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is the highest congressional visit to Ukraine since Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi visited over 2 years ago. But since then, much has changed in Washington. On Friday, the Biden administration announced new sanctions targeting more than 500 individuals and entities in Russia. This is in addition to the more than 16,000 sanctions from other countries since the start of the war.
We're also taking action against 3 individuals specifically in connection with the death of Alexei Navalny, the prison warden, the regional prison head, the deputy director of the Federal Penitentiary Service.
And President Biden urged Congress to pass a foreign aid package that includes $60 billion for Ukraine.
House of Representatives must pass the bipartisan national security bill. The bill provides urgent funding for Ukraine, and it passed overwhelmingly in the Senate.
Despite 2 years of sanctions against Russia and more than $75 billion in aid to Ukraine, the conflict continues. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Thousands gathering as former President Trump holds his final rally before the South Carolina primary. And Nikki Haley seeking to appeal to independent voters in a new message today. NTD's Iris Tao has more on the upcoming face-off from Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Thousands of supporters are here for Trump's final rally in South Carolina, as this time tomorrow, voters will be casting their ballots. And Trump, who's leading Nikki Haley by double digits in her home state, sounded confident on Thursday about a decisive victory.
It looks like she's going to lose by 25 or 30 points. That's a lot.
After tomorrow night, starting Sunday morning, the entire party needs to coalesce behind Donald Trump.
We need all this to end so we can be focused on November. If you're about to go play for the Super Bowl, you need everybody on the team to be focused on the game, not focused on their own side issues.
Haley's own campaign today acknowledged that it will be an uphill battle, but Haley, who's vowing to stay in the race even after Super Tuesday, is continuing to campaign here today.
We love you. Thank you so much.
And in a new ad released today, Haley's campaign highlights this message.
Vote to end the chaos. This election is open to all registered South Carolina voters.
But critics say it shows.
Nikki Haley is counting on Democrats to turn out and vote for her in the open primary here in South Carolina.
South Carolina has an open primary, meaning that any registered voters can vote unless they have voted already in a Democratic primary here weeks ago. But despite that, South Carolina has a lot more active Republican voters than Democratic ones, and it does not have New Hampshire's pattern of independent voters swinging back and forth. Reporting from Rock Hill, South Carolina, Iris Tao, NTD News.
I was at the Conservative Political Action Conference and spoke with Mark Lauder about the upcoming primary. Mark is currently the Chief Communications Officer at the America First Policy Institute. He also served as Director of Strategic Communications for the Trump-Pence campaign in 2020.
Mark Lauder, thank you so much for joining.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course, Mark. Right now, recent polling shows heading into Saturday's South Carolina primary, former President Trump up 63%, Nikki Haley 33%. This is in her home state. What's going to happen if that's the end result?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, I really don't see an end game here for Nikki Haley. She's going to be embarrassed in her home state by 25, 30 points if the polling holds true. But then when you look forward to the Super Tuesday states, and the latest polling has her losing by 60, 70% in almost every single one of those states. There's not a single state where she's winning. So you have to ask yourself, what are you in this for? Because you're going to have lost the first 3. You're going to lose your home state. You're going to lose the next 8. What is the end result that you're looking for?
As Laura Ingraham highlighted in their town hall with former President Trump down in South Carolina, he's also competing right now in a state like New York. What do you make of this?
I think it's what we see going across the nation right now. It's buyer's remorse. They might have voted for Joe Biden for a number of reasons, but they don't like the results. When you look at the polling on the issues, Joe Biden's disapproval is 20 points ahead, or double-digit ahead of his approval on every single major issue. The economy, inflation, crime, the border, the Israel war, the Ukraine war, foreign policy, you name it, Joe Biden is disapproved by double digits. And so I think what people are saying is, we may have voted for him because we didn't like how he handled the pandemic, or we didn't like the mean tweets. We don't like the results right now. We want what we had back.
President Biden facing a lot of pushback from within his own party when it comes to Israel and Hamas. The Knesset just voting for against a two-state solution. I think it was 99-10, which means that was, crossed partisan lines. Maybe the, 10 Arabs that they may have, within the government voted for it. How big of an issue do you see this playing just for America's, foreign policy?
Yeah, this war, this horrific attack, is truly showing the weakness of Joe Biden, but also the divide in the Democrat Party. America has always stood by our longstanding ally in Israel, and of course the America First movement, President Trump, firmly in support of Israel. But what you are seeing is Joe Biden trying to tiptoe, because he's losing his radical Muslim base. He's losing his woke, progressive, young base. You have older Jewish voters who are going, whoa, you're abandoning Israel, you're abandoning Hamas. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place of his own making. And it's really difficult for him. And I think for folks who are just not sure, ask yourself one question. Why does Joe Biden and the Democrats insist on a ceasefire in it with the Israel-Hamas war while they're asking us to further fund Ukraine? What's the difference? The difference is they don't support Israel.
Mark, lastly, I want to get your thoughts on a vice president choice. The former president, hinting at a short list. You have Byron Donalds, potentially, Tim Scott, Kristi Noem. Who's your pick?
Well, I'm not going to name a name. I obviously worked for the former vice president, so I know something about the vice presidential sweepstakes, or the veepstakes as we like to call it. The one thing that I will remind everyone when they bandy about various names is every vice president, regardless of party, fills a need in the campaign of the president. So it could be demographic, it could be geographic, it could be a policy area. So when we're looking at all these names and we're throwing names about, ask yourself, what do they bring to the ticket that Donald Trump doesn't already have? Or what area do they strengthen that Donald Trump doesn't already have? And I think when you look at that metric, and then obviously the person, whether that person can work with the president, whether they're qualified to be the president, a heartbeat away, then I think you've probably got your name. But I think the names that are being thrown out there, a lot of good ones there, I think a lot of them would make good vice presidents. Ultimately, it's the one job in the White House that can't be fired. And so that they and the president have to be in total sync together, because they're together for 4 years.
Mark Lauder, really appreciate it.
Thank you
for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.